The evening began like any other. I had been relaxing in the bedroom after a tiring day, waiting for my husband to return from work. The house was quiet, with only the gentle hum of the air conditioner breaking the silence. Seeking to unwind, I decided to take a soothing, warm bath. The bathroom had always been my retreat, a place to escape the day's stress. The warm water and calming lavender scent filled the air, easing my nerves. As I sank into the tub and closed my eyes, I anticipated my husband's arrival. He often came in to check on me, sometimes even surprising me by joining me in the bath. I found it sweet how he could make me smile, even when I wasn't in the mood. Tonight, I expected the same. I heard the door creak open slightly but didn't look up, assuming it was him. The familiar sound of footsteps and the soft click of the door shutting signaled his arrival. My heart began to race, stirred by the familiar thrill of knowing he was near. The dim bathroom light obscured my vision, but I didn't need to see clearly. Smiling with my eyes half closed, I waited for him to surprise me as he had so many times before. I expected him to speak or touch me, perhaps teasing or saying something affectionate, but instead, there was silence, only the sound of him moving closer. I could feel his presence behind me, my skin tingling with anticipation. My heart raced as the quiet tension in the air made the moment even more electrifying. Leaning back slightly, I waited for his touch, but something felt different. The energy in the room had shifted. Normally, he would have said something by now, perhaps a playful comment to make me laugh. Instead, the silence persisted. Uneasy, I opened my eyes, still expecting my husband. But an instinct told me something was off. Turning my head, I froze. Standing there wasn't my husband. It was my stepson. For a moment, I was paralyzed, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. How had I confused him for my husband? The shock of realizing he had been silently watching me in such an intimate moment sent a chill down my spine. He appeared just as stunned as I was, but there was something else in his expression, an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Was it curiosity? Desire? I wasn't sure, but the charged tension between us was undeniable. Quickly, I reached for the towel beside the tub, wrapping it around myself as my face flushed with embarrassment. I tried to laugh it off, thinking perhaps he had entered by mistake, but the silence between us was heavy. Words failed me at first, my heart pounding, not from fear but from the intensity of the moment. The air seemed thick with something unfamiliar, something unspoken. Summoning my voice, I finally asked, "What are you doing in here?" My words came out shaky, uncertain. He stammered, glancing away before meeting my eyes again. I thought you were Dad," he muttered, his face turning red with embarrassment. "He didn't leave, though!" He stood there, lingering, as if unsure of what to do. A part of me wanted to tell him to go, to end the awkwardness and return to normalcy. But another part of me, the part that felt the strange energy in the room, was curious. What was he thinking? And why couldn't I shake the odd sensation coursing through me? I cleared my throat, hoping to dispel the tension, but it only seemed to heighten. "Well, your dad's not home yet," I said softly, almost whispering. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I could see his chest rising and falling, his breathing quick and uncertain. He looked as unsure as I felt, but still, he didn't leave, and I didn't tell him to. For a fleeting moment, we were trapped in this strange, forbidden connection. My heart raced, and I wondered if he could hear it. The air felt stifling, as though everything around us had paused, waiting for something to break the spell. Then, a sudden knock at the front door shattered the tension like glass breaking. We both jumped, startled by the sound. The moment dissolved instantly. Without a word, he turned and left the room, leaving me sitting there wrapped in my towel, my heart pounding in my chest. I was left reeling, trying to process what had just happened. The atmosphere was heavy with a sense of unreality, as though we were both trapped in a fleeting moment that defied reason. A moment that felt simultaneously forbidden and electrifying. I sat still for several minutes, trying to steady my frantic thoughts and make sense of what had unfolded. After what seemed like an eternity, I stepped out of the tub, dried myself, and hurriedly got dressed, my mind still consumed by the whirlwind of emotions. From the other room, I heard my husband greeting his son, a stark reminder that life continued uninterrupted as if nothing significant had occurred. Yet, for me, that brief instant of tension had altered everything. I couldn't stop revisiting it, replaying every detail over and over in my head. It was a dangerous thought, one I knew I shouldn't entertain, yet it lingered stubbornly in the recesses of my mind, tempting me in ways I didn't want to admit. No matter how much I wished to forget it, I realized it wasn't going away. Something had shifted, and although I wasn't prepared to confront it, the change loomed like a hidden truth, threatening to unravel everything. The next morning seemed ordinary. My husband kissed me goodbye as he left for work, and my stepson avoided eye contact as he headed out the door. However, the memory of that moment lingered, unspoken, yet undeniable. No matter how hard I tried to push it aside, I couldn't help but wonder about its meaning and what might happen the next time we were alone together. I tried convincing myself it had been nothing more than an awkward incident, meaningless and inconsequential. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something had undeniably changed, and there was no returning to the way things had been. The days that followed were fraught with unease, a subtle but palpable tension lingering between my stepson and me. Every time I met his gaze or felt his presence nearby, I was reminded of that night, of the charged energy that had passed between us. Though no words were spoken or actions taken afterward, the memory remained vivid. I tried to dismiss it as a mere accident, acting as though everything was normal, but it felt like we were both pretending nothing had happened. My mind kept replaying the way he had stood there, the expression on his face. I didn't understand why it affected me so deeply, but it did. Every time the memory resurfaced, my heart raced, and my skin tingled with the lingering intensity of that moment. I was determined to move past it, reminding myself that I was married to his father and we had a good life together. But I couldn't ignore how that unexpected tension had awakened something within me that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't merely attraction or curiosity, it was something more profound. A yearning to be seen, a desire long buried beneath the routine of marriage. About a week later, my husband was called away on a sudden business trip, leaving just my stepson and me alone in the house. I reassured myself that it was no big deal, that life would go on as usual. Yet, deep down, I felt a growing sense of unease, as if something unavoidable was building between us. That first night, I found myself restless, wandering the house in an attempt to distract myself with chores or television. Still, my thoughts kept returning to him. I could hear him moving about in his room, the faint sounds of his footsteps in the hallway, which unsettled me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Eventually, I retreated to my bedroom, seeking solace and peace. I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, desperately trying to divert my attention, but my mind kept circling back. I imagined hearing his footsteps drawing closer, wondering if he would knock on my door. Shaking my head, I told myself it was just my imagination. He was likely just as uncomfortable as I was, and he wouldn't dare cross any boundaries. But as the night dragged on, my nerves remained on edge. I finally got up to splash cold water on my face, hoping to dispel the intrusive thoughts. The house was silent, the dim hallway light casting long shadows as I walked toward the bathroom. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I felt like a stranger to myself, caught between desire and guilt, struggling to reconcile the turmoil within me. Closing my eyes, I let the cold water flow over my hands before splashing it onto my face. When I opened them, I saw him in the mirror. My stepson stood in the bathroom doorway, just as he had that night. This time, there was no doubt about his identity. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to face him, clutching my towel tightly around me. Even though I wasn't in the tub this time, I found myself asking, my voice barely more than a whisper, "What are you doing?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that sent a wave of unease through me. His dark eyes held something I hadn't seen before, something that left me both anxious and intrigued. "I didn't mean to scare you," he finally said, his voice soft and low. I wanted to talk." I swallowed hard, uncertain of how to respond. The air between us felt heavy, and I could hear the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "About what?" I managed to ask, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. He stepped closer, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him. The proximity made my pulse quicken. "About that night," he said quietly. "I can't stop thinking about it." His words caught me off guard, stealing my breath. This was the conversation I had been dreading, the one I had desperately tried to avoid. But now, standing here face to face, I realized I hadn't been able to stop thinking about it either. The memory had clung to me, the feeling of being seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. "I thought you were your dad," I blurted, trying to defuse the situation, to make it all seem like a simple misunderstanding. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't the full truth. "I know," he said, moving even closer. "But it wasn't just that, was it?" His words lingered, heavy with implication. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to push him away, to tell him to leave, to pretend this wasn't happening. But another part of me, the part that had felt that inexplicable thrill that night, wanted to stay, to see where this would lead. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my shaky voice betrayed me. He was so close now that I could feel his breath on my skin, his nearness sending shivers down my spine. "You do know," he whispered, his hand brushing lightly against my arm. The contact sent a spark through me, and I gasped softly. "This is wrong," I said, but the words felt empty, hollow. There was no real conviction behind them because, in that moment, all I could feel was the heat between us, the magnetic pull of something both forbidden and exhilarating. Something I hadn't experienced in years. "I can leave if you want me to," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Just say the word and I'll go." But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. Not yet. He moved even closer, and the tension between us snapped like a taut string breaking under pressure. Before I realized it, his lips were on mine. At first, the kiss was tentative, hesitant, but it quickly grew more fervent, more desperate. I kissed him back, my hands gripping the edge of the sink as my body responded instinctively to his touch. In that instant, the guilt and confusion that had weighed on me dissolved, replaced by something raw and primal. It wasn't love, or even lust. It was the sheer thrill of stepping over a line, of venturing into the unknown. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and flushed, I saw the same chaotic blend of emotions in his eyes that I was feeling: desire, guilt, and uncertainty. We both knew we had crossed a boundary we couldn't uncross. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I shook my head, still trying to steady my breathing. "It's not your fault," I said softly. "It just happened." For a few moments, we stood in silence, both of us grappling with the weight of what had just unfolded. But even as the reality of it all began to sink in, I couldn't deny one thing. I didn't entirely regret it. If this story resonated with you or moved you in any way, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more stories like this, stories about healing, resilience, and finding light in the darkest of moments. Thank you for listening.